I dropped out of school when I was 13. Not because I wanted to, not because I was lazy, but because my mom was dying. Cancer. Fast and brutal. My dad had already run off years before, and there was no one else. So it fell on me. I was just a scrawny kid in Ruston, Missouri, one of those places where the streets chew you up if you don't learn how to move invisible. Every day was about surviving, quietly. I cleaned up after my mom, fed her, sat with her through her pain, and when she finally passed, I was 15 and already felt 60. School didn't matter after that. Life had already handed me my diploma in pain and duty. At 19, I met Melissa Grant. She was everything I wasn't: sharp, ambitious, and always planning 10 steps ahead. We met at a diner where she worked part-time while attending community college. I was laying drywall during the day and doing odd jobs at night. She liked my hands, said they looked like they'd done real work. I liked the way she talked about the future, like it was this shiny thing we could hold if we just worked hard enough. We fell in fast and hard. Within a year, we were married, living in a beat-up trailer that barely had running water. It didn't matter. We had dreams. At least I thought we did. I worked 6 days a week in construction, bringing home just enough to keep the lights on and gas in the tank. Melissa studied at night, buried in textbooks and spreadsheets, chasing a career in finance that I never really understood. She'd stay up late calculating things I couldn't pronounce, but I'd make her coffee and rub her shoulders, proud that she was doing what I never could. I thought that was love, sacrificing so she could climb. But something shifted once she got her first job at a downtown firm. The clothes changed first. No more thrifted jeans. Now it was tailored skirts and pressed blouses. Then the talk shifted. She started calling my job manual labor with a kind of soft disgust, as if it was something she hoped I'd eventually outgrow. We stopped talking about dreams and started talking about appearances. She began avoiding bringing co-workers around the trailer. Said it was temporary, that I deserved more, but I could see the shame behind her eyes when she said it. She started staying later at work. Dinners turned into microwave leftovers, and her phone buzzed more often than her eyes met mine. I asked once if she was seeing someone else, not because I believed it, but because I needed something to explain the distance. She didn't even deny it at first, just sighed like the weight of my question exhausted her. Then she said no, but in a way that made me feel like the real betrayal was how little we had in common anymore. We were both 26 when she told me she wanted a divorce. She sat me down at the chipped kitchen table and laid it all out like a business proposal. She said I was a good man, that she'd always be grateful, but we'd grown apart, that she needed more than what I could offer. I asked what that meant, and she said she needed someone who fit into her world, someone who could hold a conversation at networking events without looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. She said she was tired of feeling like she had to explain me. That was the part that broke me. Not the divorce, not the fact that everything we built was crumbling, but that she was embarrassed by me, by my callous hands, by the way I talked, by where I came from. Like all the sacrifice, all the nights I spent eating ramen so she could study, all the hours under the sun. Didn't count once she stepped into her glass office tower. I signed the papers a week later. No fight, no begging. Just a signature and a quiet drive back to the trailer we once called home. I packed my things that night, left the wedding photo on the wall. Let her keep the memory if she wanted it. I took my silence and the kind of pain that doesn't scream, it just stays. A few months after the divorce, I was still stuck in that numb haze. I'd move into a rundown rental on the edge of town, the kind of place where the floors slanted and the plumbing moaned in protest every time I turned on a faucet. My work stayed the same. Long hours, busted knuckles, dust in my lungs. No future in sight, just routine. I didn't think much anymore. I just got up, worked, came home, drank a couple of beers, slept, repeated. That's when the job came through. My crew got contracted to demo an old storage facility on the outskirts of Ruston. Some eyesore leftover from the 70s, abandoned for years, rumored to have been used for everything from meth labs to illegal gambling. We didn't ask questions. We were paid to tear it down, not play detective. It was a muggy Tuesday morning when it happened. The others were outside loading debris into the dumpsters, and I was working alone in the basement, breaking down drywall. The place stank of mold and rot, and the air was thick with mildew. I swung the sledgehammer hard, expecting to see more of the same behind the wall. Pipes, wires, maybe a rat nest if I was lucky. Instead, the wall cracked open like a secret. Behind the crumbling plaster and wooden studs, there was a dark, hollow space. No wider than a crawl space, like someone had sealed it off deliberately. I shone my flashlight inside and saw them. Duffel bags. dozens of them, packed tight, coated in dust. I pulled one out, unzipped it, and nearly dropped it. Cash. Stacks of it, bound with old rubber bands, stained, brittle around the edges, but real. 10s and 20s mostly. Some hundreds. I didn't count right away. I just sat there staring at it like I'd accidentally cracked open the floor of a casino vault. There were 68 bags in total. I know because I ended up counting every single one. They were hidden like someone had planned to come back for them, but never did. My hands were shaking, not from excitement. Fear. I knew what this was. This wasn't misplaced casino earnings. This was drug money. Dirty, dangerous, and more than I'd ever seen in my life. I stood there for what felt like an hour, heart pounding, sweating through my shirt, thinking about what this meant. I should have called someone. The police, the company owner, anyone, but no one else had seen it yet. I was alone, and all I could think was, this could change everything. My life had been nothing but sacrifice. Dropping out of school for my mom, working myself raw so Melissa could have her dreams, watching her walk away like all I'd given was just a stepping stone. I'd never even asked for anything, but now this felt like the universe finally tossing me a bone. A crooked, blood-stained bone, sure, but one I could build a life with. I made my choice. I took the money. Not all at once. That would have raised red flags. I packed the bags into my truck in small batches over the course of a few nights, always after dark, always alone. I stashed them in a rented storage unit 2 towns over, under a fake name. My hands trembled every time I touched it, but I kept going. The guilt crept in at night, whispering that I was no better than the men who'd left it there. But I pushed it down. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone. The money was abandoned. Whoever belonged had either forgotten it or died trying to keep it. It was just sitting there, rotting in the dark. What good was it doing there? Still, I wasn't stupid. I knew I couldn't just walk into a bank and drop off dirty cash. So I did my homework. Quietly, carefully. I started small, bought a condemned house at auction for cash, fixed it up with my own 2 hands, flipped it a few months later under a borrowed name. I used the profits to legitimize a small LLC, bought another, then another, kept the paper trail clean. Tax returns, invoices, phony contractors. I watched YouTube videos about laundering schemes like they were self-help tutorials. Within a year, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The money wasn't fast, but it was steady, and it was mine. I still wore the same old boots, still lived low to avoid attention. But slowly, I began carving out a new life, one built not on sacrifice, but on a decision I made in a dark basement alone with everything to lose. 15 years passed like shifting dust in a worksite wind, and if you looked at me on any given day, you wouldn't have seen a millionaire. You'd have seen a man in worn-out flannel with sun-creased hands, boots scuffed at the toe, and jeans with old paint stains. My truck was still the same Ford F-150 I bought used for cash back in 2011. Its seat ripped, the dashboard cracked from years of heat. I liked it that way. People left me alone, which was exactly how I wanted it. But behind that plain exterior, I'd built something massive. Quietly, brick by brick, deal by deal, laundering that basement cash until every dollar was legitimate on paper. It started with single-family homes in neglected neighborhoods. I'd buy them cheap, fix them myself, flip them fast. No partners, no loans, all cash. I kept everything under shell companies, layers so thick that even seasoned accountants would need days to map the web. Once I had my first million clean, I shifted gears. I bought a rundown strip mall on the south end of town. 10 units, all vacant. Within a year, I had a bakery, a vape shop, a martial arts studio, and a discount dentist renting space. Every rent check came in tidy, documented, taxed. From there, it snowballed. By the time I turned 41, my empire stretched across 3 counties. Apartment complexes in growing suburbs. Storage facilities near interstates. A pair of retail centers in college towns. I owned parking lots, laundromats, even a mobile home park under a trust name. I never took out a mortgage. Everything was paid in full. I reinvested constantly. Every dollar earned was split. Some into maintenance, some into new acquisitions, and the rest into accounts spread across 7 banks, all tied to my fully legal holding company. I even hired a financial advisor who thought he was working with a silent investor group. He had no idea he was just managing the portfolio of one man with callous hands and a rusted-out toolbox in the back of his truck. And then there was a delicious irony where the money finally landed. 7 accounts, all nested carefully inside branches of a financial institution that had, just 6 months prior, promoted Melissa Grant to chief executive officer. My ex-wife, the same woman who had once told me I didn't fit into her world. Now she sat in the corner office of a tower built on money. I had turned from blood-stained duffels into a legal fortune. She didn't know it, of course. How could she? Every LLC I created had generic names. Every deed and tax form passed through lawyers and accountants who never saw my face. On paper, I didn't exist. I was a ghost who built castles through mirrors. I never once flaunted the wealth. No flashy watch. No beach house. I still lived in the same modest home I'd bought for cash a decade ago. 3 bedrooms, nothing fancy, but clean and quiet. My neighbors thought I was just a hard-working landlord who kept to himself. I paid cash at diners. I fixed my own plumbing. I mowed my lawn every Sunday like clockwork. And all the while, my net worth climbed into territory I never thought possible. $72 million. That's where I landed last quarter. All clean, all mine. But I never felt rich. Not really. I felt untouchable. Hidden. Like the kind of man nobody looks at twice, yet who quietly owns the ground beneath their feet. It was a Monday like any other, humid and quiet. The kind of morning where the sky hangs low and everything feels a little heavier than it should. I had stopped by Horizon State Bank, one of the 7 where I kept my accounts, to make a routine deposit. Just a simple check from one of the retail tenants. Nothing remarkable. I parked my truck in the back like I always did, out of sight, away from the polished cars that lined the front spaces, sleek sedans and luxury SUVs that belonged to people who wanted to be seen. I walked in wearing my usual, worn flannel jeans and boots still dusted from a morning inspection at one of the apartment sites. I didn't belong to this world, not visibly, and that was always my power. The bank lobby smelled like expensive furniture and synthetic lemon polish, humming with soft instrumental music. There were maybe 10 people scattered around, quiet conversations between tellers and clients, a few suits pacing near the private offices. I was standing in line, head down, check in hand, when I heard the unmistakable sound of designer heels striking marble, sharp, rhythmic, deliberate. Melissa. I looked up, not out of curiosity but instinct, and there she was, flanked by a man who looked like he'd been bred in a boardroom, Brent Patterson. I had seen his face on billboards, advertisements, press releases, smiling like the world had been handcrafted for his benefit. Tall, trim, hair too perfect, teeth unnaturally white, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck. Melissa walked beside him in a navy blazer, her expression composed and distant, like someone used to being the most important person in the room. They were heading toward the elevator when Brent spotted me. He stopped mid-step and turned, eyebrows raised in theatrical disbelief. Is that him? His voice was just loud enough to slice through the quiet murmur of the lobby. Heads turned. Conversations paused. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Brent took a few steps toward me, Melissa trailing behind, her face now tight, like a string pulled too hard. He looked me up and down with the kind of smirk that people practice in mirrors when they think they're untouchable. Well, I'll be damned, he said. You're the dropout, right? The one she used to be married to. He laughed like he had said something clever, like I was the punchline of a joke only he understood. I looked at Melissa, but she didn't say a word. Her eyes met mine for just a second. Something flickered there, something unreadable. And then she looked away, lips pressed together like she was holding her breath. Brent stepped closer, invading the little space I had around me, lowering his voice just enough to keep it personal, but still loud enough for the room to hear. Listen, I don't know why you're here or what you think this is, but this is her place now. Her world. Not yours. You really don't belong here. He nodded toward the door with a tight smile. You should probably go. For everyone's sake. I didn't flinch. I didn't rise to it. I just smiled, slow and steady, and tucked the deposit slip back into my pocket. I could feel the heat of eyes around us. People watching. The staff frozen behind their counters, unsure if they should intervene. Brent stood there waiting for me to defend myself, to say something small and angry that would justify his performance. But I didn't. I nodded once, turned around, and walked out the front doors without a word. I didn't leave angry. I didn't leave embarrassed. I left exactly how I arrived, silent, steady, invisible to anyone who only measured worth in polished shoes and smooth talking. Let him think he won. Let her pretend I was a chapter she had long since closed, because they had no idea who they just tried to erase. And that was the beauty of it. The second I stepped out of the bank lobby that Monday, I pulled out my phone, walked straight to my truck, and dialed Monica Lou. She picked up on the second ring. Sharp as ever, no nonsense. Efficient in the way only someone who dealt with high-value clients for a living could be. I told her in a calm and measured voice that I wanted every dollar moved out of Horizon State Bank. Not next week, not staggered over time. Immediately, I heard the hesitation on the other end, the careful pause of a professional trying to make sure they heard right. She cleared her throat. You're looking at over $400,000 in early exit penalties, Jason. We got structured deposits, locked CDs, account maturity dates. You want me to burn it all? I didn't even blink. Every damn cent, I said. And I want the closure handled in person. She asked who I wanted to sign off, already knowing the answer. I could feel her nodding as I said it. Melissa. No delegate, no middle manager. The CEO herself. She tried to suggest an assistant VP might suffice, but I cut that off quickly. Set the appointment. Thursday afternoon. Her office. There was another silence. Then she said, understood, and we hung up. The rest of the week moved like molasses. I didn't change my routine. I still visited job sites, answered maintenance calls, checked tenant requests. I still wore the same work shirt and jeans, still ate breakfast at the Greasy Spoon on Jackson 4th, still drove my scratched-up truck around town. But there was a hum in my chest, low and steady, like tension winding a spring. I didn't sleep much Wednesday night. Not out of nerves, just anticipation. This was a revenge. It wasn't some dramatic stunt. It was principle, a matter of being seen. Not as a dropout, not as the ex, not as the embarrassment in boots, but as a man who owned more of her bank's capital than most of the suits whose hands she shook at charity galas. Thursday afternoon, I didn't dress up. I wore the exact same flannel, dusty from a morning visit to a construction site, boots still caked with dried mud, jeans with a fresh tear along the knee from climbing into a crawl space. I didn't wash the truck. I didn't tuck in my shirt. I didn't want polish. I wanted truth. I wanted everyone to see exactly who they'd written off. I parked right in front this time, didn't circle to the back, walked in like I had nothing to hide. The receptionist looked up with that polite tension that always follows someone who doesn't match the furniture. She checked the appointment, eyes flicking between her monitor and me like the screen must be wrong. Monica met me in the lobby with a folder under one arm and a look that was part professional, part unreadable. She guided me past the glass offices, past the curious glances of staff and clients alike, every step echoing louder than it should have. Melissa's office door was already open when we reached it. She was standing behind her desk, stiff, guarded. She wore gray this time, expensive, sharp, cold. Her hair was perfect, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. She didn't offer a handshake, didn't sit. Brent wasn't there, of course. This wasn't his domain. This was hers, and now it was mine, too. Monica placed the folder on the desk between us. These are the closure forms, she said quietly. Account dissolutions, fund transfers, tax documentation. Once signed, the assets will begin clearing by end of business. Melissa glanced down, then back up at me. Her eyes lingered for a second too long on my clothes, and that was all I needed. I didn't say anything. I just smiled. That same quiet, easy smile I'd given Brent when he told me to leave. Then I picked up the pen and started signing, slow and deliberate, while Melissa stood there and watched 7 accounts, $72 million, walk right out of her bank. As I signed the last page, I looked up and met Melissa's eyes. She was trying to keep her expression locked into something neutral, maybe authoritative, but it was already starting to crack around the edges. Her fingers were clasped too tightly, the muscles in her jaw flickering with tension. I slid the pen back across the desk and let the silence hang in the air for a long moment before I spoke. I'm still a contractor, I said, voice calm, level. Still wear these boots every damn day. Still get dirt under my nails. That part hasn't changed. Her mouth opened slightly, unsure where I was going with it. She said nothing. But I'm also the man who had $72 million sitting in this building. I continued, tapping the folder between us. Not counting real estate. Not counting equity. Just liquid. Quiet money. Yours to manage. Yours to protect. And you didn't even know. She blinked. It was subtle, but the kind of blink you give when your brain short-circuits. Like a reboot trying to process something too big, too sudden. Her posture faltered slightly, a shift in weight that told me the floor under her just shifted. You, she asked, barely audible, like the word had to fight its way out of her throat. That much. I nodded once. 7 accounts. split for coverage, registered through different LLCs, all of them parked here, in the bank you're running. She leaned back slowly, eyes darting toward the window, as if maybe this was a dream she could shake herself out of. I saw the realization settle in. Not just the shock, but the consequence. The scale. This wasn't about pride anymore. This was business. This was survival. Her survival. She stepped away from the desk, hands no longer composed but restless, moving to the back of her chair, then to the edge of the window. She turned, eyes wide now, the practice executive mask completely gone. "Jason," she said, voice softer, almost frantic. "Please don't do this. Please. You don't understand what that kind of movement will do. If that money leaves before end of quarter, it'll gut our liquidity numbers. We're already tight after the regional acquisition. This will crater our capital reserves. The board's going to see it. My position," she stopped herself, inhaled sharply. "My job is on the line." I watched her carefully, noting every crack in her composure, every flicker of desperation she never would have allowed me to see in another life. But now she couldn't hide it. Now it was real. Brent didn't know what he was saying, she added quickly, stepping closer again. He was out of line. You know how he is. He didn't mean to disrespect you. He didn't know who you were. If I had known, Jason, please, we can move it slowly, quietly, or not at all. Just don't do this. Her voice wavered, not with manipulation, but with something much closer to fear. Real fear, not the fear of embarrassment, not even the fear of professional failure. It was a fear of a foundation she thought was solid turning to dust under her feet. I held her gaze. My voice didn't rise, didn't shake. "He said I didn't belong here." I said, "Loud enough for your staff, your clients, the lobby cameras." He made sure I knew my place. "I didn't tell him to say that," she whispered. "No," I said. "You just stood there and let him." She didn't answer. I picked up the folder, nodded politely to Monica, and turned to leave. I didn't have to say another word. Melissa already knew I wasn't coming base. 3 months later, the fallout hit Horizon State Bank, like a storm rolling in without warning. Rumors had started almost immediately after I pulled my accounts. Whispers among branch managers and analysts about a massive liquidity event. But once the quarterly numbers dropped, it became impossible to hide. The shareholders were livid. A $72 million withdrawal wasn't just a loss. It was a gaping wound. Panic spread to the boardroom like fire. Eyes turned to the top, demanding answers, demanding blame. Melissa was the first to fall. The official press release used words like leadership transition and strategic change, but everyone in town knew what it meant. She was fired, quietly but unmistakably. Her portrait came down from the lobby wall. Her name vanished from the website overnight. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just watched from a distance as the institution that once dismissed me was forced to reckon with the price of arrogance. Brent, predictably, didn't fare much better. His title was stripped, and they shuffled him into a newly invented corporate outreach initiative, which, according to someone I knew in HR, was just a dressed-up punishment. Word got around that he was now required to complete mandatory executive humility and sensitivity training. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He'd walked into that bank thinking he owned the room. Now he couldn't even keep his own office. Meanwhile, I had already moved on. I opened new accounts at Phoenix First Bank, a regional firm with solid roots and a staff that didn't look twice at my boots or the dust on my shirt. From a first meeting, they spoke to me like a human being, not a walking dollar sign. They didn't care how I dressed or where I came from. They cared about how I handled my business. They didn't just earn my money, they earned my respect. That's where I put the next chapter of my life into motion. I took $20 million, no investors, no partners, just my own capital, and launched the Whitaker Foundation. I didn't want a big ribbon-cutting ceremony or my name on some building. I wanted impact, real practical help. The foundation offered GED scholarships for teenagers who'd slipped through the cracks, grants for trade school applicants who couldn't afford tuition, and seed money for small business startups, specifically for kids who dropped out like I did, not out of laziness, out of necessity, out of life getting in the way. Word spread fast, first in Ruston, then in the surrounding counties. Applications poured in. Guidance counselors started calling. Old teachers reached out. For the first time in a long time, kids who felt invisible started seeing doors open. They didn't have to explain why they hadn't walked the traditional path, because someone who had been there was already holding the gate open for them. I kept my life quiet, still drove the same truck, still wore the same boots, still walked into diners and hardware stores without fanfare. But people began to talk. Not in loud ways, in respectful ones. I heard the word legend more than once. Some folks thought I'd won the lottery. Others said I must have made a killing on crypto. No one ever quite figured it out, and I didn't feel the need to correct them. When people asked how I did it, how a dropout from the rough side of Ruston ended up shaping lives and running millions, I always gave the same answer. Calm, simple, honest. Sometimes the best way to prove your worth is to let your success speak so loudly your doubters can't ignore it. And then I smiled, just like I always had.